John Tory steps down as Toronto's mayor. I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. News broke on Friday evening that John Tory would be stepping down as Toronto's mayor. Now, to most of us, this came as a surprise, kind of out of nowhere. It turns out that John Tory was having an affair with a staffer, and of course, this is reprehensible. In the world of politics, it's not only about what you do, it's about who you are. And both of these components have to be held firm if the people are going to have faith in you. I believe that John Tory stepping down is honestly the right outcome. It's going to save the city of Toronto from much reputational harm, and it'll probably give him the privacy that he needs to fix the problem that he's going to be dealing with his family now. I did find his apology to be pretty weak, though. He tried to say that he was a family man. Well, obviously not after this. He's just trying to do some reputational building, but I don't think that's going to work. And further, he said it was a lapse in judgment. Well, it was an affair that went on for a couple months. It seems like a lot of lapsing in judgment was happening there, for it to be prolonged and repeated. The bottom line for citizens is that we need to hold our government officials to the highest standard. They hold disproportionate power. They cannot be allowed to run amok and do as they please. As a government official, you cannot leverage your position of power to get sexual favors from staff. And that honestly goes for all people in positions of power, even just a regular boss or manager. Even if the relationship was supposedly consensual, which I doubt. The fact that he is the boss here makes it look suspicious and very unlikely that ulterior motives were not present. And we haven't even got to the worst part yet. We haven't mentioned how he willingly betrayed his wife. The wife that he's been married to for 40 years, he's actually been married for longer than the staffer that he had an affair with has been alive for. I believe the staffer was something like 30 years old. Now his wife, the very woman that he swore an oath of loyalty to, has been betrayed. If he can do that to her, somebody he supposedly loves, someone he built a life with, someone he had children with, imagine what he could do to you, a taxpayer who he doesn't even know. This type of situation truly speaks to his character. It's a character that I would deem unfit to serve as mayor. There's also another scandal going on right now within the Trudeau government that is somewhat related. You have an individual marrying, and people are calling for her to step down. I believe that would be correct. Her character has also come into question. She was caught red-handed giving her buddies government contracts. That's highly corrupt, and totally shameless too. This is during a time when many Canadians cannot afford groceries, where people are struggling to pay rent. And here she is paying her bestie $2,000 an hour for a lesson on how to speak. And when asked by the investigative committee if she would be willing to pay that money back to the taxpayer, she had nothing to say for herself. Totally shameless, and somebody whose character is not fit for the highest offices in Canada. She should be ousted. It's completely irresponsible for these government officials to be acting this way. Their character matters. They are supposed to be role models for citizens. They're supposed to be trustworthy. We've elected them to do a job, not to betray us and to look out for their own selfish interests, but that's what people like Mary Ng and John Tory did. It's utterly embarrassing for both them and for us as the people who played a hand in giving them these roles. So now, back to Toronto. What's next? Well, for one of the largest cities in Canada, the deputy mayor will now take over temporarily as the mayor. Then, the council is going to declare a vacancy, and then there are going to be some procedures that have to happen. There are certain rules that have to take place before an election can start. For example, there's a notice period, a campaign period, and whatnot. So the deputy mayor will be the de facto mayor for some months, but eventually a by-election will occur. Now, we can expect this election to be very competitive. There seems to be an interesting phenomenon at the mayoral level. Typically, the incumbent, that is to say, the individual who was the current mayor, has a massive advantage when they run again. You see that with John Tory and mayors across the GTA and across Canada. If they win once, the odds of winning again are very high. Maybe that's due to name recognition or something along those lines, but now that there is no incumbent, things are wide open. Individuals have a more equitable chance of winning. Now, my only hope is that Toronto elects a wise, honorable leader. They're a major pillar within Canada, and what happens in Toronto has trickle effects for other cities, both large and small. Toronto has had Rob Ford and his drug scandal, Tory and his mistress scandal. The city has a ton of issues, and they need someone who can focus on those. Somebody who can respond logically, and who will not be tainted by personal and sometimes ethical distractions. This is also especially important when you consider the fact that Doug Ford has granted big city mayor powers to Toronto. And what that means is that the mayor holds a lot of power. The council becomes less important, and that one individual is going to call a lot of shots. So, for example, these mayors have the ability to table the city budget instead of using the council for that. They can appoint a CAO, a city manager. They can hire and fire department heads, public servants. And they have veto powers. And to override a mayor's veto, you have to have 2/3 of council vote for that. So majority rule is not applicable here. You can already imagine the type of destruction, or rather inaction, that a crappy mayor could produce given these powers. You could have a great council and a terrible head would drag everything down. Now, for those who aspire to run for mayor of Toronto, there are a couple of high priority things I think that they can campaign on that will resonate with the people. Number one is safety. Things are just out of hand on places like the TTC. There has to be a protocol for dealing with that. The next thing is affordability. Things like housing. That has to be addressed. And finally, I do think that there is room for a character argument. To come forward and say, I'm going to handle these major issues, I'm going to get things done, and here's my plan. And further, I am not Rob Ford or John Tory. I'm somebody with integrity, and I'll prove that. And I'll ensure that I do nothing to violate the trust that you place in me. Toronto has been given these controversial mayors. They need a change and they need some stability. I think these are winning messages. So now with that, it does bring us to the end of our conversation for today. If you enjoyed the material, be sure to leave a review and share. They'll help us grow. And you can find me online at perryplatform.org and on social media at perryplatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.